All right, everybody, welcome into Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. This is episode 123 here on this March the 27th, 2024. Just a few days until Easter, as we are now fully in the spring season. I'm Nick Hill, live as always from Chattanooga, Tennessee of the United States. And joining me from Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil is Gus Tomazeli. Gus, how are you doing?
Doing good. Ready to talk some sports from America in Brazil. A lot of playoffs, both in both countries, and definitely some upsets here in Brazil and also in US.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start right into it here. Of course, it's been March Madness for the past week here in the United States. I guess tonight's the second night without any big March Madness games. Of course, the Madness picks back up tomorrow with the Sweet 16, but we had the first and second rounds last week. And, overall, I would say they're probably the least amount of upsets that we have had in March Madness in a very long time. It's felt the top 8 seeds, all the 1 and all the 2 seeds, have advanced to the Sweet 16 for the first time since I think 2019. So the upsets weren't too crazy. And it's kind of interesting to think about why that is. And to me, the main reason is we had so many upsets in the small conference tournaments that these 15 and 16 seeds just did not end up being very strong. And really, none of them came that close to an upset. I mean, the closest one was probably South Dakota State, but at the same time, we saw, of course, St. Peter's against Tennessee, no chance. We saw, trying to think who else was up there.
Let's talk to the only big upset that happened in the tournament so far, which is Oakland beating Kentucky. That I feel like, you know, uh, like listening to the post game show and reading the comments. Uh, the big question is when enough is enough between the relationship of Kentucky basketball and John Calipari. I think that's the big question.
Well, apparently this wasn't enough because they have announced today that they are bringing him back for another season in Lexington, which somewhat surprises me because you just have to wonder, is Kentucky settling for mediocrity? And
or I guess the buyout so big, they're like, okay, I mean, the fan base, they're gonna get, some upset, but they will understand because I guess what I heard on the radio is that the lifetime contract for John Calipari expires in 2019 and in 2029. So I guess he has still more 5 years on the contract.
oh yeah, technically it re-ups once a year. Basically, is the way it works. And anytime Kentucky could buy him out and get out of it, but they're just, for some reason, they're choosing not to. And really, this game came down to their main flaw we saw all year. Their defense sucked. And they let Jack Golke go 10 of 20 from the free. I mean, to have that good of a shooting performance is incredible. And Golke was just hitting insane shots throughout that game. But then, it's one thing for him to go off, but it really wasn't just him. They had that center. I think his name was Tyler Townsend, I think was his name. He had a pretty good game. He was dominating down low, and they had a couple of other guys hit some key shots down the stretch. But when you look at the offensive output for Kentucky, because remember, Kentucky, while their defense struggled throughout the year, their offense was spectacular for most of it. However, you can't have draft picks like Reed Shepherd score 3 points. You can't have, Deshaun or DJ Wagner score literally nothing. Of course, Rob Dillingham only put up a 10. The only two that really showed up here were Antonio Reeves with 27, and then you had Trey Mitchell with a double-double at 14 and 13. The rest of that team didn't show up for that game, despite them being overloaded with NBA talent. And Jack Golke said it best in his post game. I know those guys are going to the NBA, and I'm not, but I knew that for 40 minutes in a college basketball game, I could outdo them. and it really exposes the true flaw of Calipari. The one and done in the modern college basketball is not going to win you championships because these American players are not being developed at a high school level or below, especially those that are going through the AAU circuit to be team players. And to create a team, you got to keep players there for more than a year. And you have to get them to buy into the team and not just, care about their draft stock. Because I know John Calipari said he's proud of what happens in June when they go away. But the last time I checked, he's paid to be the coach of the Kentucky Wildcats. And the last time I checked, the fans up in Kentucky only really care what happens in March.
Yeah, because he what he said in the post game press conference, like, oh, I care about the players and and what they go to the drafts. Like, okay, so leave Kentucky and coach AAU or build a team that exclusively produce players for the draft, and don't coach a team that has a goal to be the champion.
Yeah. Yeah, because I said, as you perfectly put, Kentucky has a goal. Kentucky fans expect to still be playing right now. And frankly, they should. Since 2019, they've been to the Sweet 16 once. Tennessee is now about to head to their third Sweet 16. It's not supposed to be like that. It's just unacceptable for them. And, I still think with the talent that they get that they're going to be a threat every single year, of course, because they're Kentucky. I mean, they haven't fallen off like we've seen some other basketball powerhouses in their region have. But still, like, for them to lose games like this, I mean, you had St. Peter's 2 years ago when you had Oscar Shibwe, and now you're going to blow having Antonio Reeves, Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepard, Aaron Bradshaw, to blow them to lose to freaking Oakland. And you've got to give Oakland a shout out, right? Their coach, Greg Camp, has been there for 40 years. So this was long overdue for Oakland. I remember they beat Tennessee in back-to-back years when we had Bruce Pearl back in 2009 and 2010. So, I mean, they've won some big games in the regular season, but obviously this was their biggest win in March Madness. And, to give them some credit, they went in, they executed their game plan, and they exploited Kentucky's weakness of perimeter defense. But as well, because you saw the reaction from the Kentucky fan base. Like, listen to Matt Jones's post-game show on KSR, and he was like, the situation's untenable. He was literally sitting in the Oakland hotel lobby.
Yeah, yeah, I heard that too, and I couldn't imagine a more painful post game show than that, because not only you have to unfold what happened on the court, you have to listen to the other team that beat your team that you're covering celebrating.
Yeah, and I think he was completely right that they should have gotten rid of him after this. And I don't know what Mitch Barnhart is thinking here, because how are Kentucky fans going to be excited for this team next year? How do you show back up when, you go game after game, you're going to win the most of your games, you're going to be in contention for the SEC title probably. But then how do you trust your team to show up in March at all? Mentally.
And I think it goes deeper than that. You're gonna alienate the fan base, and I guess the boosters in college basketball is not as important or as decisive for decision as in football. Because, for example, if what happens to John Calipari was happening in football, the boosters would have take over. Like, for example, with Jimbo Fisher, the booster says enough is enough with not producing results, and the boosters are like, we found the money for the buyout. Just get rid of Jimbo Fisher. I compared the Jimbo Fisher situation, which was way shorter of a tenure compared to John Calipari. But if that was happening in football, he would have been gone a long time ago.
Yeah, and I think what makes it harder here is John Calipari has won a national championship with Kentucky. The problem is, with all the talent he has had, all the NBA players, he probably should have like 2 or 3 at the minimum. And in fact, he only has one is underachieving to an extent. Now, we can argue whether or not that's underachieving. I mean, And it's rich coming from me as a Tennessee basketball fan, considering we've never been to the Final Four ever. Hopefully, I can say that's a little bit different in 5 days. But, um, you know, I mean, a national championship is a national championship, and it's
But
extremely hard to win.
but we saw coaches that won national championships and were get rid of in way lesser time than John Calipari. Of course, more in football than basketball, but still, like, um,
I mean, it's not always the wisest choice. I mean, think about what Tennessee went through after we fired Phil Fulmer in 2008. We went for the wilderness for 15 years after that decision. I mean, yeah, I know Fulmer was falling off. I mean, this is a similar situation, right? Because Fulmer was at his peak in the late 90s. He wins his national championship, has super stars like Peyton Manning, like, Anthony Davis, right? Like, who helped Calipari win his sole national championship, basically the equivalent to his Peyton Manning, right? Both went on to be incredible in their professional leagues. But, throughout the years, Kentucky still has remained pretty good. But they started to slip up here and there, have an NIT year here and there, like how Philip Fulmer would have a bowl ineligible year in 2005. But they would still be pretty competitive. They would still occasionally go to the SEC title game. But that wasn't
yeah, Tennessee went literally to the SEC championship a year before he was fired.
Right. And I would caution Kentucky fans, even though I do think, if you fire him, you could get pretty much anyone you want as Kentucky. The SEC is about to get harder, right? We're about to get Texas, about to get Oklahoma. It's not a guarantee Kentucky has to be at the top of the pecking order. And I got to remember, before they got Coach Cal, Kentucky was mid for a while in the mid-2000s. So it's no guarantee. Look at Indiana. Look at Louisville. It's no guarantee you're going to be good. And I think, just acting like Kentucky would just be amazing regardless of who they have, not necessarily the case.
But yeah, and also Kentucky seeing the rise of really good programs in their own conference. Where I think Tennessee and Auburn, even though Auburn had an upset as well, I think
Right.
Bruce Pro kind of is showing results. Auburn literally won the SEC championship, and Tennessee, as you point out perfectly, has been to the Sweet 16 in 3 years. In three
Right.
seasons since 2019.
Yeah, and Alabama now is in their second straight one as well.
Yeah.
And sorry, I was going to say, I also want to bring up the fact, you got to think about the football side of this because, most SEC schools are more concerned about football first. And Kentucky is an exception. But, we remember Mark Stoops, right? Remember after the Georgia butt whooping they took, he whined and basically saying, we can't beat Georgia because we don't get enough money and you need to pay us more money for NIL. And you have to wonder how much of that will, buys into this because, Mark Stoops has taken some shots at the basketball program. And he wants football to be more successful. And you have to wonder how many boosters are thinking, okay, do I want to invest more in football? Do I invest more in basketball? And it's sort of like an inner turmoil there at Kentucky.
Yeah, you point out something I was going to say. There is even a friction within the athletic department because Kentucky, as we knew as a basketball school, is being questioned by their own football program by Mark Stoops, that I think not long ago said, "Are we really a basketball school?" Questioning that status because he knows that status takes resources that he could have used to build a better football program.
Yeah, when did he make that? Did he make that statement in 2021 or did he make that in 2022? I want to look back up and see when he made August 13th, 2022. So since then,
I think it was probably right after they were eliminated by St. Peter's, I think.
Yep. So since then, they've won one tournament game. And Tennessee's won 4. And they're 0-2 against Tennessee in that time. So I guess Kentucky is a nothing school.
Yeah. So I guess
enjoy your horse racing and bourbon in Kentucky.
Yeah, because I mean, uh, in a in a decade, the state of Kentucky went from being a state really strong in basketball, then now non not Louisville and Kentucky not being good enough.
Right. And speaking of Louisville, and I'm going to see if Jason Wyatt can come on at some point here because I really want to get his take as a obviously as a Louisville alum, knows this team a lot better than we do. But Louisville has their coach. Reportedly, their coach's name is Pat Kelsey, coach from the College of Charleston. And, Pat Kelsey just took his team to the tournament. And from the stuff I've been reading, they say that he's very highly energetic and he's a younger guy. And unlike their previous hire in Kenny Payne, he obviously has been a head coach here for the past couple of seasons. First at Winthrop, then at Charleston. So, obviously, from the win and run record, sure, he looks pretty good. But, I think for a lot of Louisville fans, and, been, talking to Jason some, kind of following the Louisville search from afar, it really was a Tennessee-esque coaching search. They were thinking they were going to get like Scott Drew. There's like a Jay Wright mentioned in there at one point. They're talking about like Brad Underwood from Illinois, who is still in the tournament as a Sweet 16 team right now. And then they kind of wound it up, finishing with the College of Charleston coach. It's an interesting hire because I feel like Louisville feels like they did not get the quality type coach they wanted.
I think I kind of compare this hire, and oh yeah, so there's somebody better that can talk about this.
Yes, I wonder where you were. I was about to send you the link because I wanted your take on it.
I heard you talking about my new coach and figured I should hop on and crash the podcast once again. Thanks for letting me crash it every once in a while.
Yeah, you should have come on for the Kentucky segment because we just spent 15 minutes bashing UK.
Look, man, I can sit here and bash UK all I want, but I would have taken John Calipari at Louisville in half a second. So I really don't have that much room to talk, but it was kind of funny.
All right, but anyway, Pat Kelsey. I know you guys were really wanting to like Scott Drew. I know Brad Underwood came up at one point, but Louisville sells for an up and coming hire. I mean, what's the vibe in Louisville?
I don't know that it's necessarily settling. You have to go and ask Scott Drew. He's the best coach in the country probably at the moment. You have to make him tell you no, and we did. We went after Billy Donovan, made him tell us no. He's staying in the NBA. So you went and swung big twice. Okay. So then you're thinking, okay, Dusty May is probably the top of the line of the realistic gets right now, because Louisville basketball is in a situation right now similar to Tennessee football was in 2021, just trying to get somebody to take the program out of the tailspin that it's been in. And so with that said, you go after Dusty May, and he tells you yes, and then he switches up and goes to Michigan. And now there's a lot of things that have been said about why he did that, but the fact of the matter is he eventually turned back on his agreement, and that's that. And so by association, he told Josh Schertz, who is a good friend of his, that he was taking the Louisville job. And so Josh Schertz was like, all right, well, I'm not going to get the Louisville job. So he signs the memorandum of understanding with St. Louis. And so when we go after Josh Schertz from Indiana State, he now has a $4.6 million buyout on top of his Indiana State buyout. The $4.6 million would be owed to St. Louis. And so Louisville said, to hell with that. We're not paying two buyouts for an up-and-coming coach. We'll just go get Pat Kelsey. And to be completely honest with you guys, I'm happier with Pat Kelsey than I probably would have been with Dusty May. And the reason being is Dusty May, while he did take FAU to the Final Four last year, and that cannot be discredited. However, I watched him mismanage that game last weekend, and that's not isolated. I think he is a guy who, while he can coach really well, I haven't seen it in a long-term play. I saw FAU get hot last year. That's about it. With Pat Kelsey from the College of Charleston, you've seen his teams do very well, and he seems like a good X's and O's guy. The problem with this is he's not established at the Power 5 level, and I mean, I get that, and that is a concern. But he has been a head coach before. Kenny Payne's only knock was, okay, can he be the head coach? The answer was no, an emphatic no, no less. You don't have that question with Pat Kelsey. You know what you're going to get out of him, and you know that with this NIL and the resources that Louisville has, he's going to be able to get higher quality players into that offense. And truly, I think he's going to do fairly well at Louisville. I don't know if he's going to be, and this is almost going to be verbatim what I said about Josh Heupel. I don't know if he's going to be the guy that can take us to the promised land, but he will get us out of the tailspin that the program is in. And at very minimum, he'll get us to a point where we can go and poach one of those really good coaches again.
Yeah, I think that would be your best case scenario at this point, right? Because, I mean, obviously 12-52 the last 2 years is, I mean, it'd be unacceptable for anyone. I mean, Tennessee, I think, would fire someone for that same exact record. And just reading some of the stuff up on this, you really have to question your AD here. I think Josh Hurd has mismanaged his entire situation, because the report that he didn't start looking until the end of the season is insane. Like, we all knew he was done in November.
Oh, you knew he was done after he went 4-28 in his first season. And I'm going to get to the Josh Hurd point here in a second, but there's one thing I want to say really quickly before I forget. The problem that I have is people saying nobody wants to go to Louisville. Look what they did to their own. Look how they treat their own. And Kenny Payne was a champion alumni, and he had all the tools in the box. He's a good recruiter. He's a good X's and O's guy. The only question is, could he be the head coach? And eventually we learned the answer was no. But people are saying, look how Louisville treats their own. And that's just BS. Look how we treat our own. We treated our own to an extra season he should have never had after going 4-28. That's abysmal. You can't do that. You can't go 4-28 and get a second season. And he still did. And not only did he get a second season, he got a second full season. And that just does not happen. And the fact that Josh Hurd decided to be, quote, loyal to Kenny Payne, knowing he was going to fire him, is just asinine. That shows that he's an incompetent athletic director, and he's already not in the good graces of very many fans anyway, because Louisville had a very decisive athletic director in Tom Jurich. He was ruthless. And then Vince Tyre, not quite as ruthless, but he was a fan favorite as well. Josh Hurd is neither a fan favorite or ruthless. And so the problem that you have with him is you have fans trying to defend him. And I was one of them. He did what he needed to do. He extended Jeff Walls on the women's team. And he extended Dan McDonnell, the baseball coach, both of which are excellent coaches, top probably 5 in the country in both of them. And fair play. Good for him. But what else has he done? He botched the Kenny Payne hire. And to be fair, that was the right decision at the time. But he gave him a second season. You know that the wheels fell off. You watch the atrocity that was Louisville basketball, and then you say, okay, well, give him a full season, give him a full off season, whatever, work his magic. And he scammed kids into coming to Louisville to play for him. He scammed Sky Clark. He scammed Brandon Huntley Hatfield. He got these guys to come to Louisville and play for him, and he was terrible. And Josh Hurd knew he was terrible and decided anyway to not start, reaching out. Hey, you think your client would be interested in maybe Louisville when we make the change? No, he didn't do any of that. And that set us back so far. Because if you know going into it that you have 5 or 6 guys that are interested, go pick your favorite, make it happen. then you don't have this entire media circus of all these coaches turning Louisville down. Now I understand. Scott Drew, make him say no. Fine. Billy Donovan, make him say no. Jay Wright, make him say no. Now I don't know that we went after Jay Wright, but my sources are solid that we offered both Billy Donovan and Scott Drew the job, and both said no. Fine. You did your diligence. Now go after your top choice and go get him. I don't know what happened with Dusty May. I'm not sure why he decided to spurn Louisville at the 11th hour, but you have to wrap that deal up. You have to. And the fact that Josh Hurd didn't, the rumor is that Dusty May went to Michigan, got a better offer, and then brought it back to Josh Hurd, and Josh Hurd called the bluff and called wrong. Now, that could be true. I'm not sure. All I know is you have to let that guy, you have to make your guy the number one, period. You have to get him there. Unless he's requiring some ridiculous and asinine amount of money or refuses to leave. But the reason that you don't even bother with the guys that refuse to leave is that you know they're not going to leave when you put out your feelers 3 months in advance. But he didn't. And he made the entire athletic department look stupid in the process. Now, with that being said, I think Pat Kelsey is going to do well. But his entire job, like Josh Hurd's job, is on the line with this hire. Straight up, that's just reality. If he botches this hire, Louisville's on the brink of becoming Indiana basketball and Nebraska football. Louisville basketball is on that brink. And this team was number one in the country 4 seasons ago. That's how quickly it can change. And this program, all it needs is a good coach. And is Pat Kelsey that guy? I'm not sure. I think he can take the program out of the tailspin, but is he one of those guys that from a mid-major that, the big resources and the big spotlight can elevate them? I'm not sure, but he's from Chris Mack coaching tree. Chris Mack is who I wanted all along. He was fired by Louisville over some nonsense, and that's a whole story for another time. But the Spark Notes is one of his assistants tried to extort him, and he basically told him, "You're fired." And then he got fired because the university says you can't fire somebody without a witness present. And meanwhile, he was literally trying to extort him. That was a federal lawsuit with the extortion case. So that's a whole thing. But regardless, Chris Mack should have never not been the coach. But considering that he's not anymore, I'm okay with Pat Kelsey. I'm hoping he can follow in Chris Mack's footsteps and be one of those guys that with the added resources and the bigger spotlight, that will elevate their own game from that mid-major level. Hopefully that covered all the bases.
Yeah, there's a couple things I definitely want to bring up. But yeah, when it comes to Dusty May, I forget who said it. It might have been Jeff Goodman. I'm not completely sure. But basically, whoever I heard this from basically said that Dusty May, at the end of the day, may have not been comfortable taking a basketball school job and instead wanted to go to a football school job in Michigan, where obviously they're just coming off a national title and the pressure isn't going to be as intense as it would be at Louisville. So I think that could be a scenario. And I don't know what the two contracts between May and Kelsey look like. If May did end up getting more money from Michigan. But I think, in the long run, I don't know. And I don't know how Louisville fans are feeling about this as the Big Ten and the SEC continue to become the dominant two conferences. And I know that's obviously been more of a football deal, but obviously the revenue they generate is going to get spread around every sport, and those basketball programs are going to make more revenue than maybe schools in the ACC will. So, I mean, how much does that factor into this situation for Louisville since they're not in the Big Ten or the SEC right now?
Oh boy, conference realignment, my favorite subject. Okay, so let's tackle this one at a time. The Dusty May thing, can you take the heat? I've heard that as well. And the rumor was also that he was preferring Vanderbilt and Michigan over Louisville, which tells me that is probably accurate. I don't care who you are, but when you coach Louisville men's basketball, your seat is the hottest seat in the country even when you get there. Your ass is on fire as soon as you get to town because that is the lifeblood of the athletic department. This is a bigger deal than Duke basketball, North Carolina basketball. It's a bigger deal. And Louisville has the the TV ratings to back that up. Louisville has the apparel deal to back that up. Now, as far as conference realignment, I think it is kind of a factor to look for the long run. The difference, though, I think the ACC is going to crumble. And, Clemson and Florida State are going to be the first two dominoes to fall. But Louisville's eventually going to end up in the Big 12, where we probably should have belonged in the first place instead of going to the ACC. The Big 12 always made more sense. But the ACC was the opportunity. We actually got the spot that UConn thought they were going to get. And then UConn ended up in the Big East. And so the new Big East. So the Big 12 in Louisville that's going to be a good match, especially for basketball. The Big 12 is the dominant basketball conference. You have 6 or 8 different schools from the Big 12 that all are championship caliber programs at various points in time. And meaning within the last few years, or you think they are on the rise. And so I think that's going to be okay for Louisville. I think going to the Big 12 is probably for the best. Duke, the U, Wake Forest, or maybe not Wake Forest, but Duke and the U definitely, I think, go to the Big 10. I think Florida State and Clemson probably go to the SEC. And the reason Duke and the U are my choices specifically for the Big 10 are academics. They fit in. North Carolina, Chapel Hill probably also goes to the Big 10. I think the ACC schools are going to end up dispersed kind of throughout both of those conferences, plus the Big 12 for the basketball schools that may not get into the Big 10. The problem with Louisville is we don't have the academic prowess to get into the Big 10, whereas Duke and UNC probably do. But regardless, the football thing is going to take care of itself. I think the Big 12 is probably going to be that third conference that survives in football also. So with that said, while I do think that there is money to be made from football, I think that the biggest thing to worry about here is your apparel deal. And I think that's your easiest source of revenue, that you can negotiate for yourself. And right now, Louisville's got the second or third richest apparel deal in the country, thanks to Tom Jurich. And people are saying, oh, well, Louisville's going to go to Nike, Louisville this, Louisville that. No, they're not, because Louisville's not worth nearly this much money on the open market right now. And we got like 10 more years in the deal. So for as long as that Adidas deal is still worth as much as it is, I think Louisville's going to be fine in terms of resources. But in the long run, it may end up being a situation where the Big Ten and the SEC kind of form an alliance that usurps the NCAA as the governing body, with football at the forefront primarily. But eventually, I think that, I've always been steadfast in this. Conference realignment is going to happen. Everybody's going to end up under one of those roofs, under one of the umbrellas, Big Ten or SEC, but they're going to end up in divisions that are similar to what we have now. You'll have your Big Ten Midwest division, which is your standard Big Ten. You'll have the Big Ten West, which is like the Pac-12. And then you'll have the SEC East division, which is, the SEC. And then you'll have the SEC West, which is like the bottom half of the Pac-12 and like the southwestern part of the country. And I truly believe that this is how it's going to end up. And I think eventually, Louisville's going to fall into one of those. Even if it's the Big 12, I think there'll still be a third conference, and they'll have some sort of agreement, because the SEC and the Big Ten can't just shut out all of the basketball powerhouses like Kansas, like Connecticut, Louisville, North Carolina, Duke. Those schools are going to be in somewhere.
Yeah, I'm trying to envision a future March Madness, what that's going to look like, with, how the auto bids are going to work, and it's going to be crazy. I know Greg Sankey proposed a new format where you kind of de-emphasize the mid-major March Madness, which kind of made it ironic that both Oakland and Yale pulled off upsets over Auburn and Kentucky last week. And the fact that the SEC only has 2 teams left in the Sweet 16 at all is kind of ironic. Thankfully, though, the good guys are one of them. So
I think the proof of why that is nonsense is in what is Indiana State doing versus what is Virginia doing right now.
Yeah.
I mean, Virginia got in directly above Indiana State, and Virginia looked pathetic. Indiana State continues to cook in the NIT, and they would have won some games in the Big Dance had they been there. And I think the big conferences know that's the truth, and they want to shut out these mid-major teams because they want that revenue for themselves. I get it. The problem is nobody else is going to agree to that. And so long as the NCAA and the other conferences have any sort of say-so, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So while we have you on, to transition, I kind of referenced the Vols being one of the 2 Sweet 16 teams. The Vols survived last week. We blew out St. Peter's Thursday night. Easy peasy. No reason to be worried about that game at all. Honestly, the name St. Peter's stressed me out, but clearly not the same St. Peter's team from 2 years ago that beat Kentucky and Purdue. But then Saturday night happened, and that was a stressful affair against the Texas Longhorns, a low-scoring, ugly game where we went 3 of 25 from the free, but somehow, some way, unlike in years past, we survived the Tennessee Special, as you like.
Barely. I mean, that end of the second half was very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and I'll say this, that's the type of game that in the past we lost. Like, look at how we lost to Loyola Chicago. Look at how we lost to Oregon State. Look at how we lost to FAU last year.
Right. And so, I mean, you guys remember this. I predicted us to lose to Oregon State. I went and covered that game having predicted that we lose. And I didn't pick us to lose this year until the Final Four. Now, my cynicism says that I know better. But with that said, I go gut instinct on my brackets, and I didn't think that we were going to have any problems. Now, it's going to be close. Creighton will be a tough test. But I think pounding it inside is going to be a key factor. And the difference between now and years past is Tennessee has multiple guys who can manufacture a bucket during the Tennessee Special. And, like you said, that's what I like to call it. So for anybody that doesn't know, the Tennessee Special is going ice cold for 5 or 10 minutes in the middle of the second half sometime, and just it leads evaporating. And so you have a couple of guys that can manufacture buckets and score points during the Tennessee Special. And that's the difference between this year's team and years past. And that's big because when you look at it, this team has no holes. You can go inside. You can drive and kick. You can shoot threes. You can slash. And the team plays great defense. What else could you want? Truly. What else could you want?
Right, and I think the weakness throughout the year for the Vols has been when we play really elite centers. Because I think Jonas Idu at times has not played well against guys like Tolu Smith for Mississippi State, as an example. And of course, here with Creighton, they have a Ryan Kalkbrenner, 7-foot senior. He's averaging 17 points a game. That's a matchup that does concern me. But, I think what the Vols really need to emphasize here in this game is their physicality on defense. Because as bad as they shot on offense, they also made Texas shoot awful on offense themselves. I mean, Dylan Disu was 4 of 18 from the field on Saturday night. I mean, Josiah Jordan-James locked him down. Max Abemus, one of the all-time leading scorers in the history of college basketball, didn't do much of anything on Saturday night either. And they're going to have a huge test here because 3 of Creighton's guys average at least 17 a game. You have, of course, Kalkbrenner, the 7-foot senior center. But then you also have Baylor Sherman and Trey Alexander, who both almost average 20 a game. And, obviously a lot of those guys can shoot. And, if they get hot, that's going to be a challenge. But I really hope that Tennessee can be really physical with them, maybe throw them off their game, and maybe provide a different level of athleticism that maybe Creighton isn't used to.
I mean, I think that anytime you can play elite defense and hard-nosed defense and be physical, which is what the Tennessee Volunteers do, whenever you can play defense like that, you're going to have a shot. I mean, look at Tony Bennett's Virginia. They look absolutely abysmal on offense every year, and yet they still won a championship because they could play defense, and they made it happen. That's the type of physical and ugly game that Tennessee needs to play sometimes, and we saw it against Texas. Texas shoots the lights out, and yet they couldn't hit anything. And so as long as the Tennessee Volunteers can make opponents shoot as poorly as they do during the Tennessee Special, you're going to have an opportunity to win. And I don't think Purdue wins. I don't think Purdue wins, and so before the potential Elite Eight matchup, I think Purdue loses in the Sweet 16. And so you tell me anybody else that you think will scare you, and I'll tell you that I think the Tennessee Volunteers can beat anybody in the country.
Well, I mean, to me, I think Connecticut's the team to beat right now.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But in our region, I mean, I think Tennessee has a chance to beat any of them, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, Gonzaga, they're playing very good ball. Now, granted, I think Kansas clearly was just done with the season. I mean, Bill Self said as much in his press conference where he was like, yeah, I've been thinking about next year for a month now in the postgame, which was just a wild comment for him to make.
Yeah.
I mean, he made those comments because of the amount of injuries he had in this last few weeks. So that's what he was trying to say, I think. He was like, hey, I'm already thinking about next season because I know how limited of the roster I have right now.
Yeah, but you can't say that though, and Gus, you can't say that.
No, I know.
I get what you're saying, and I agree with you, but you can't say it. You can't say that out. You cannot verbalize that. Period.
Yeah,
that is a big no-no.
What I would rephrase, like I would have said better was like, I know the challenges we had in these last few weeks. I know this team played their hearts out, and we are looking forward to next season. He pretty much said the same thing, but with a better way.
So says the public relations professional.
Yeah, like a PR. The job of the PR is saying something in a different way, like repackaging. Like PR is a lot of repackaging. Like, did you see what I did? I think I pretty much made the same statement that Bill Self made in a more positive way. It's like, hey, I know this team had a lot of challenges in the last few weeks. I know we lost some key players and we did not have the outcome that we wanted, but we are looking forward to next season because we are already thinking about it. Like, look how better this sounds than what he said.
Right, and as a journalist, that's why I try to avoid PR people.
And see, the thing about Bill Self is I think he knows he can get away with that because he's got the lifetime contract. He's one of the best coaches in the history of college basketball. But you still can't say that. You just can't. And I get it, but Kansas was never going to repeat last year. Kansas was probably not going to win it again this year, especially with the one guy just ruling himself out for the tournament, which I think is bogus. I think he's opting out of the bowl game, in those terms to prepare for the draft. But that's a whole other story. And then that's sad. But it is what it is. But yeah, I think Connecticut's the team to beat. I still stand on my original prediction that they're going to beat Houston in the national championship game. But in the region that the Vols are in, Purdue versus Gonzaga, I think Gonzaga wins. And I think Tennessee can take care of business with Gonzaga because they don't have somebody like a Zach Edey that will just, for lack of a better term, just draw fouls all night. And I mean, that's really what Zach Edey does. Let's be real. But I don't see somebody that can exploit Tennessee's weaknesses like that from Gonzaga. And so there's no reason that Tennessee can't go to the Final Four. I think you have to take care of business tomorrow. Friday.
Friday.
Yeah. Tomorrow's Thursday. Tomorrow's opening day.
Opening day.
Yeah.
Opening
Shout out
day.
Aaron Young in the comments. He said, I would have loved to have seen Indiana State play against one of the top programs. Tennessee, Purdue, Zaga.
I would have loved to
Indiana
see
State
Indiana State play against Colorado State. Not against Tennessee, though. I would not.
Well, that would have put Indiana State in the second round. Honestly, I don't know if we would have survived Indiana State with the way we shot Saturday night. At least
that's
Texas
why I didn't want that matchup.
Yeah. Because knowing our history, that probably would not have ended very well for Tennessee.
The other matchup would be interesting to see in March Madness is Alabama Clemson because they had really intense football rivalry in the past 8 years, but I don't know how much it will be translated to basketball.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Do you think Arizona and North Carolina take care of business?
Well, I guess you got to ask yourself, what are your chances for the upsets there? If Bama hits a ton of their threes, that's their whole game plan, right? Nate Oates is just to shoot a ton of threes and get to the hole. That's their entire offense. But Bama really doesn't play a lot of really good defense, and I think that's going to come back to bite them against North Carolina.
I think Carolina's a beatable team, though. That's the whole situation with that matchup is both of those teams are very beatable, and that's why I'm excited to watch. And it's the same thing with Arizona and Clemson. I think Arizona takes care of business at the end of the day, but I think both of those games are going to be pretty close, and that's exciting for people that love basketball, like myself, and hopefully we are treated to of the 7 games. Of the 8 games, I hope 7 are magnificently close, and I hope the late game Friday is a 30-point blowout with the Big Orange winning.
Absolutely, and we'll go through regions. So we just talked about the West. The East, we've got UConn versus San Diego State, a national championship rematch.
Give me UConn by 30. Honestly, UConn is on another level from anybody else.
Right, I would agree with that. Illinois, Iowa State, I think in that other Elite Eight is good.
I think that'll be the best game of the round.
I was very optimistic about Iowa State. Remember when I made my bracket, I thought they were going to have a deep run, and as of right now, they're making it.
Look, TJ Otzelberger's a good coach. So
I'm going to pull up your bracket, Gus, so you can see how you've done so far.
I'll pull up mine too while you're at it, Nick. I know you're in the Friends of Jason bracket challenge.
Here, I will hit a sec. Well, this is Jason's. I'm sorry, this is Gus's. So you got UConn, and you've got the entire top 4 here. Now, Gus has picked San Diego State to win this game.
Really?
I think did I made UConn San Diego pick or just is automatic?
Oh no, you had this game, so you had all 4 of these teams. No, actually, you had BYU.
Okay.
16, which
you had BYU, okay.
Yeah, which they lost to Kane. Absolute frauds. But I should have known better on that one. I let Kim Palm lie to me. So you actually had Alabama over UNC in this game. But you had Dayton and Baylor in this.
Completely missed.
Yeah. Dayton put up a good fight against Arizona. It just wasn't enough. And I was shocked how Clemson just boat raced Baylor. Because I thought they were going to lose round 1 in New Mexico.
I also had Clemson losing, but Clemson's got some shooters. Clemson can play some decent defense. Anytime you can play 3, or anytime you have a 3 and D team, you can win in the tournament. So I'm not too terribly surprised.
True. And once again, just as a point on New Mexico, Mountain West, once again, 1-5 in this tournament. Only 1 team left in San Diego State, despite getting 6 bids.
They're all frauds except San Diego State. Indiana State was robbed.
Yeah, like Nevada blowing a 17-point lead with 8 minutes left. Jeez. Or Colorado State literally having 11 points at halftime. Man.
Frauds. They're all frauds.
So here you had Houston over Wisconsin. Of course, Wisconsin got upset by Jameis Madison in the PMT Bowl. So we have Houston-Duke here. So I think that's going to be the main game. And of course, Houston had to survive a miraculous comeback from Texas A&M.
With a buzzer beater.
Yeah. But somehow, some way, they survived that comeback. So what do we think here? Houston, Duke.
I'll go with my pick, Duke, Houston.
I mean, you have to take Houston until you see any flaws in Houston's game. You can't pick against them unless you're picking Connecticut over them.
I'm going to be honest. I actually like Duke in this matchup. I don't trust Houston, and maybe I'm crazy for thinking this way, but there are some flaws. And the thing about Duke that scares me is that I picked against them in the first round. I think Gus, you picked against them in the first round too. Sometimes I feel like I've noticed I feel when there's a lot of sense against a blue blood, they'll come back and just go on this insane run. And Duke definitely has the talent to pull this off. And they've played really well the first 2 rounds of this tournament. Because they got through a scrappy Vermont team and then took care of JMU. So, I don't know.
I'm sticking to my guns. Give me Houston by double digits.
Yeah. And also, as a note, James Madison's coach, Mark Byington, the new Vanderbilt head coach. I think it's a good hire for Vandy, at least for their standards. I'll be curious to see if they can keep him long term. If he does decently well. NC State, you had NC State in the Sweet 16. Congratulations.
No.
I'm pretty sure I had Kentucky. I actually had Kentucky going all the way to the national championship. Brilliant pick on my I was mesmerized by the offense and forgot they couldn't play any defense. So there you go on that one. And they play Marquette. You actually had Florida here, who lost in a classic to Colorado in the last second, 102-100, which might be the highest score regulation game I've ever seen in my life, at least by college basketball standards. That game was awesome. What do you think here? Does NC State's magical run continue?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think they've done well. I mean, they needed 5 straight wins and 5 straight days to even make the tournament, and they've carried that momentum into the tournament, but Marquette is a different beast from anybody they've played so far. Give me NC State. Excuse me, give me Marquette.
And Aaron Young says Escalade's about to drop 40, and of course, he's referring to former VFL DJ Burns. But, honestly, Marquette hasn't looked amazing in this tournament. They struggled with Western Kentucky. They had to survive a tough challenge from Colorado. I think this will be very tight, and I wouldn't be shocked if NC State pulls it off. But I'll go Marquette. All right, Midwest, as I think Gus mentioned, he picked Gonzaga and Tennessee, with Tennessee over Gonzaga. What about you, Gus?
I'll keep my pick, Purdue.
Give me Gonzaga.
Actually, I'd like Gonzaga 2 over Tennessee. For Gonzaga 2 over Purdue. And then I like Tennessee over Creighton. And do I dare say this? Yes. I like the Vols over Gonzaga as well, like Jason. Which means we're losing Friday night. Congratulations, everybody.
Yeah, anybody with any sense knows to go and bet the money line for Creighton at this point.
Yeah.
Let me see my go down. I want to see my so I have
410 points.
Ooh.
So
what percentile is this one? 54. Not bad.
Yeah. So because that's my personal bracket is 17.6. So I have Connecticut and San Diego State. I had BYU and Drake in this because I had BYU going to this Elite Eight. I had Alabama and I think it was Michigan State here. So I had North Carolina losing in the second round. I had Baylor over Arizona in this matchup. So
your bracket's been busted since day one.
I had James Madison over Texas A&M in the Sweet 16.
How did you pick against Houston? What possessed you to pick against Houston?
A&M took them to overtime, man.
I get that, but Houston is
look, A&M had played them tight. A&M had a pretty good SEC tournament run. And honestly, I didn't trust Houston.
I want to second what Aaron Young has commented. Were you under the influence filling this out? Because this is terrible. In the words of Charles Barkley, terrible.
Okay, I had Kentucky over Marquette, so obviously that didn't work out. I had Utah State over Samford in the Midwest.
I mean, good thing is Nick picked Creighton over Tennessee. So
I was actually over Texas. I had us losing to Texas in the second round. So
terrible.
So literally, the Midwest was correct.
Jason, I'll say good because he picked.
Fair enough.
To fail. So as long as Tennessee keep winning, oh my God, 17% Nicholas Hill.
Yeah, I think I'm literally last place by a pretty good margin.
And third, and look at third place. You got me.
This is just bad. Now I don't know how Nick Stringer is number one when Kentucky is done, but in any case, this is yours, Jason. 67.3%. So much better than me. So you had Connecticut over Auburn, which Auburn, man, all those missed free throws at the end of that game were brutal. But honestly, I'm not surprised because I knew having to go from playing Sunday in Nashville to Thursday in Spokane was going to be tough. And that definitely caught up to them. But still, you're Auburn. You have the athletes, much better athletes than Yale. There was no excuse to lose that game. And it really just goes to show how pointless the conference tournaments are. Florida, Alabama make the SEC tournament championship. They're both done on Thursday.
But on the contrary, you have NC State still going on a run because they went on a run in the conference tournament.
Well, they had to. They weren't making the tournament.
I mean, Kevin Keatts would have been fired by now if they didn't. Kevin Keatts was 100% getting fired and probably still will. But he may have bought himself an extra year with his last 2 weeks.
True. But remember what I said 2 weeks ago, though? I was like, I kind of hope we just burn the SEC tournament because I knew that's not the tournament I wanted to win. So, you had Illinois, Iowa State. You had North Carolina, Alabama. Arizona over Baylor, so Clemson. You had Houston and Wisconsin there. Marquette and North Carolina State, you called that one. We had McNeese over Purdue. So, and I had picked McNeese in my upset too. That was disappointing. I put way more stock in Will Wade than I should have.
Yeah, but I have 7 of my Elite 8 and all 4 of my Final 4. I'll take that.
Yeah, I think I literally have one of my Final 4 left, and that's Connecticut.
And I have 14 of my 16. I think I'm only missing Baylor and McNeese State, right? I think that's right.
Because literally my Final 4 was Connecticut, Baylor, Kentucky, and Utah State.
Yeah, I've got Tennessee, Houston, Connecticut, and I can't remember who I've got in that last corner.
Oh, God.
But I feel like I'm doing pretty well with my bracket. I've got all the bad picks out of the way, and I've still got all of my I've got 7 of my Elite 8 and all 4 of my Final 4, so I'll take it. And Aaron also says 7 of his Elite 8 still alive. And he also, good Lord, Nick is right.
Yeah, well, I will say this. I try to watch more college basketball outside of the balls, but I feel like I should have watched a bit more before I made some of these picks. Which, Jesus, that was brutal. But in any case, that's the fun of March. And see, this is why I normally make multiple brackets. But
get out of here. You go to hell.
You convinced me to
one bracket. Pick with
that's what I did. I only made one bracket, and plus I'm much busier now. So
one bracket only. One bracket or none of them.
Yeah,
like
Aaron said, pick with conviction.
So that's what I did, and you saw what happened when I picked with one bracket. It's an absolute dumpster fire.
Well, good to know that your picks this year were terrible, and that you didn't just spam a bunch of picks hoping something stuck. You don't want to be Nancy Grace throwing shit at the wall hoping something sticks. Come on now.
Yeah, I had my reasoning for my picks, so You know, it's just the way the things that work out. And I say this, I'm glad I was wrong about the Vols, at least losing in the second round. I was almost close to having that be right, but I was certainly nervous about that matchup with Texas because of the way they matched up with us. So, in any case, you know, I'd rather be wrong about that than the Vols not being in the tournament still. But you know, one thing I kind of wanted to transition into here, speaking of the SEC, because obviously we talk about the Vols in Alabama, the only two SEC teams still alive. You know, obviously Kentucky and Auburn suffered embarrassing losses. Miss State got dominated by Michigan State. South Carolina got dominated by Oregon. A&M, of course, lost a heartbreaker to Houston. Florida lost a heartbreaker to Colorado. I mean, the SEC, you know, I think for a large part of this year was thought of as like one of the best conferences in the country. Does this tournament kind of put a damper on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It does. For me, it does. And, you know, the SEC's got football. That's fine. But listen, the Big 12 owns basketball, period. And I say that having Baylor gone and having, you know, SMU not even make the tournament. And or wait, SMU's in the AAC. Never mind. But I don't think the SEC dominance is real. The ACC still pretty decent. The SEC's pretty decent. The Big 10 pretty decent. Big 12, I still think. I mean, you got Houston, Iowa State, Baylor. And I know Baylor lost, but you've got three, also four big time teams in this tournament. Now, granted, two of them lost, but I still think that the Big 12 is unquestionably. And Texas was in there as well. They were pretty good. I think they were a 10 seed, but they still had some talent. I think that's a much better conference for basketball than the SEC is. And it's not that the SEC doesn't have quality. Tennessee is quality. Kentucky was quality when they could figure out how to play for a game at a time. Auburn was quality. But this is March, and you have to be able to put that quality together. And, you know, sometimes these teams that, you know, I like to reference Moneyball. Over the course of a season, and Purdue is this way as well, over the course of a season, you can win a lot of games being pretty good at some things. But when it comes down to it and you have to win right now, there are teams that turn out to be PVU, Potemkin Village University. And now for those that don't know what a Potemkin Village is, you know, that's where you build up a facade to hide what's actually going on. And some of these teams are PVU, just straight up. And one of those things, or one of those schools, I think was Auburn. Auburn went on a good run in the SEC tournament. PVU, they're good, not great. Alabama, I also think they're good, but not great. I think Tennessee is the best team unquestionably from the SEC, but you know, then you go and look at Baylor. Was Baylor PVU? I don't think so, but just Auburn getting upset by Yale, that's bad. Clemson, at least you could understand to a degree. You shouldn't lose, but you could. There's no reason to lose to Yale. Come on now.
Or Oakland for
right.
Oakland.
Look, I'm not trying to rub that in until Tennessee wins again. But
yeah, I would say this. There's two different trains of thought because, like, you know, I don't root for other SEC schools. You know, there's this whole, you know, SEC.
Couldn't be me. I hope every one of them loses.
Yeah, so I'm not going to sit here and root for Kentucky or root for Florida, or root for Alabama, root for Auburn or Vandy, you know, because I hate all these teams. Like, I don't want them to succeed. Now, I will say when it comes to basketball, though, perceptions do matter about your conferences, much more than another conference. Like in football, the SEC is always going to have multiple teams in the playoffs. Like, I don't really care what the other teams in the SEC do. You know, outside, want to see my rivals lose. But in basketball, you know, that could be the difference between getting a 1 or 2 seed next year or a seed line. If, you know, the perception is, oh, maybe the SEC are a bunch of chokers. Maybe we shouldn't value a regular season title from there like we should, or like we did this year. So I guess that's what I'm thinking of in terms of basketball. But I'm only thinking about it in terms of how does it impact Tennessee moving forward and in potential future tournaments with the perception of this conference. Because obviously this wasn't a great look for the conference to have 6 of your teams go out in the weekend when I think most people were expecting at least half of them to make it.
Yeah, but you play a tough out-of-conference schedule for that reason. Tennessee played Kansas and Purdue. This season has played Arizona in the past. Deacon Rick always has himself a pretty good out-of-conference schedule, and that's the only way you can combat that because Tennessee is firmly planted in the SEC. And the good teams will always the best teams will always find a way to grind it out in March, and that's why you saw teams like Connecticut last year go on those runs because they were complete teams. I think Tennessee is one of those complete teams this year. Just got to survive the Tennessee special, boy.
Yeah, got to survive that Tennessee special, absolutely. But and Jason, man, thank you so much for being on as always.
Yeah, thanks for not hating me for crashing the podcast, boys. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and hopefully Pat Kelsey will work out for the Cards, and we can have them back in these March Madness discussions soon.
Absolutely.
The opposite, Jason. You're honorary guest, and you're always welcome.
Well, I appreciate that, and go Big Orange, and we'll see y'all next week. I'll probably hop in the comments next week.
Absolutely, Jason. As always, Jason Warwick, our resident Louisville expert and co-host. Aaron Young says, doesn't hurt UT at all. Every P6 school never has to worry about their conference reputation. Yeah, I think that's completely true. I guess I'm thinking about, there was a time where the SEC just stunk at college basketball. I remember, I think it was 2009. Tennessee was the highest seed from the SEC. They were the regular season champions, and we were the 9th seed in NCAA tournament. I mean, that's how bad. Literally, we were the 9th seed. I think LSU had won the conference tournament, and they were a 12 seed. I mean, the SEC was awful in basketball. So I grew up with an SEC that was awful in college basketball because all we cared about was football. But SEC schools have really any Power 6 conference that didn't have at least 2 teams in the tourney. I'm pretty sure because I think the lowest one was the Big East, right? With 3, and obviously all 3 of them are still in the tournament, which goes to show that I think the Big East should have had more. But back to my point in the SEC, obviously I think the SEC will be fine. I imagine we'll get at least 6 to 7 at minimum next year. Of course, Texas coming in, that's going to be one more team that I expect to be in the tournament every year. I think with Oklahoma coming in, they were the first team out this year, so very well they could be in the tournament next year as well. So if those 2 teams were in, you're looking at 9 teams in the tournament and almost a 10th team in the tournament. So they're going to be pretty good moving forward.
Yeah, I like how you point out something that is really fair. As much as SEC had a big fall into the tournament, the overall state of basketball, men's basketball in the Southeastern Conference is really good comparing to what was in the past.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, the way it was as a kid, it's night and day. We got teams are actually investing in basketball now, and they really didn't do that before. So we'll see what Alabama and Tennessee can do this weekend. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily rooting for the Tide, but obviously the SEC will be rooting for both the Tide and the Volunteers this weekend. All right, briefly, just some quick women's news. Of course, the women's tournament, I'll say this. Obviously I haven't watched as much of it as the men's tournament, but there have been some great games on the women's side. Stanford, Iowa State was probably among the top 5 basketball games I watched all weekend, men's or women's. Those girls were shooting the lights out in that second round matchup, went to OT. Stanford survived an upset attempt by Iowa State. UConn had to survive Syracuse. That was a very entertaining game. Obviously, all eyes in this tournament are, I would say, on 2 teams. One, you have Iowa, of course. Caitlin Clark, this is her last tour. And in fact, the game that they had on Monday night against West Virginia drew in nearly 5 million viewers, which is the largest audience ever for a women's game in the first 2 rounds. Now,
and maybe I point something about that. I think both ways are ridiculous. The ones who said, there was a lot of hype into the women's tournament. They were never gonna out-rating They're never going to surpass the ratings of the men's. But also at the same time, it's really a big accomplishment to have that growth, to have that interest into the women's NCAA tournament. So I think both ways, like the ones who kind of push back, like who criticize the hype, and the ones who don't see the hype.
Well, I will say this, it still was nowhere close to the top men's game, because the top men's game of the weekend was North Carolina, Michigan State on Saturday, because that drew over 10 million ratings. And I believe the Oakland, Kentucky game at its end was drawing nearly 10 million as well. But, you have to compare the ratings of an event compared to previous editions. And obviously, the women's tournament has grown a lot in popularity compared to where it used to be. And it's because of stars like Caitlin Clark. Now, I will say this, though. I get the sense when I'm watching Iowa that the refs bailed them out a bit because, man, they were struggling with West Virginia on Monday night. West Virginia has a very, very good defense. I hadn't watched them before, but they really mucked it up for Iowa because Iowa likes to run, get out in transition, and shoot a lot of open shots. I mean, that's what Iowa does. Because I've caught quite a few Caitlin Clark games, and West Virginia just didn't let them do that at all. And you can tell that Iowa was not comfortable, and Caitlin Clark had to really manufacture some shots that she doesn't really normally have to in the running gun that Iowa normally plays. But the free throw discrepancy was crazy. It was something like 34-10 in favor of Iowa. And watching that fourth quarter, I mean, West Virginia was not getting any calls at all. Whereas in that game, Iowa was getting any little bump. And I think that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths with the way that went down.
But definitely the matchup everybody wants to see is LSU Iowa.
Yeah,
I know Colorado and UCLA fans don't want to hear that, but the rest of the United States of America want to see LSU Iowa.
Yeah, well, in LSU, in that case, obviously, a lot of that is off the court right now because Kim Mulkey. There's allegedly a big story coming soon from the Washington Post. Now, we don't know what's in those contents, but it's big enough apparently for Kim Mulkey to come out and read a prepared statement bashing journalism and just saying straight up, this is fake news, whatever. If they run this story, I'm going to sue them. So whatever happened, apparently, must not be very good for Kim Mulkey. Shout out to Rafael Fernandez-Dele.
Oh, my man, Rafa. Yeah, big Eagles fan. He is the analyst of Rio Branco. Rafael Della Vedove, big NFL guy. We always talk about his beloved Philadelphia Eagles, and, he definitely is excited to the duo of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley.
Absolutely. And there's some big news, at least for American audiences, on that game coming up later this year in Brazil. But LSU, with what's going on hanging over their heads, they did go out and they beat Rice, and then MTSU, who had upset Louisville in the first round. And MTSU was leading LSU at the half, but LSU really got it going in the second half. And frankly, MTSU was getting kind of hosed too by the refs. Although granted, I don't know if MTSU was winning that game regardless. WVU had a shot to beat Iowa. MTSU really didn't. But still, Iowa LSU one game away from what will be an all-time Elite Eight game between Iowa and LSU. Although I do think Iowa is the better team. But still, LSU has Angela Reese, Haley Van Lith, a lot of talent that would be insane for the women's game. But UCLA is good too. So that will not be easy.
But my Final Four, definitely South Carolina, Notre Dame, LSU, Iowa. And I think it's going to be the rematch of last year's final, LSU, South Carolina.
That sounds about right. Now, I do want to bring up the Lady Vols because, they came up short to NC State in the second round on Monday. They were down by 20 at one point in that game, but they almost came back to almost tie the game, but they just could not complete the comeback. Rakea Jackson was amazing in that game, but just not enough, especially when you look at some of the role players that just gave them nothing, unfortunately, in that game. And you just have to wonder how many more of these early exits can Kelly Harper afford as the head coach of the Lady Vols?
I think probably it will have to be because I always compare Kelly Harper to Holly Warlick, and for Holly to be eliminated was a mediocre SEC, a mediocre regular season, early exit in the SEC tournament, and a first round bounce in the NCAA tournament after almost not making it. Tennessee was one of the lowest seeds possible.
Right, and the Lady Vols were not the case here. They were 6 seed. They were comfortably in. They got better throughout the season. But they just couldn't pull off any big wins towards the end, and that was kind of the thing that was disappointing because you had Rakea Jackson, who's going to go to the WNBA, and I don't really think you're going to have anyone on this roster next year that's even close to that. So I'm honestly expecting the Lady Vols to kind of take a nosedive next year, and I think Kelly's time is running. She's running out of time, I would think. A Rocky Top, granted,
Yeah,
how much the Lady?
like what happened to Holly Warlick. Yeah, she ran out of time and she couldn't do anything with the talent that she had.
Absolutely. So I really think that there's really going to be no excitement for Lady Vol basketball next year, and that's going to be a problem. But granted, for Danny White, you have to ask yourself, how much do you want to invest in women's basketball? Especially with men's basketball rolling, you got football, what people are very excited about right now. I don't know if the fan pressure is going to really be there to demand a change.
No, and also how much, how long Danny White wants to stick with a coach that he did not hire, because Kelly Harper was hired by Philip Fulmer, not Danny White.
Absolutely. But anyway, disappointing. I was hoping they'd go a little bit further than that, but, it just is the way it is there for the Lady Vols. Shout out to the Lady Mocs. Of course, they lost to NC State as well. NC State completely destroying my women's tournament in Raleigh over the weekend. But Lady Mocs also lost their head coach, Sean Poppy, to Clemson. So, obviously, Lady Mocs will be searching for a new coach, but this is just the life of UTC. You have a good coach. They leave for a bigger school. You got to find another one. So, rinse and repeat for the Chattanooga Lady Mocs. But in any case, some other college sports notes. Vols continue their spring practice. Apparently today they had their first scrimmage. And surprise, surprise, Nico Imialapa threw a 90-yard touchdown pass to freshman 5-star wide receiver Mike Matthews, among other notes. I mean, just hearing stuff like this is making me so excited for the upcoming season.
I don't want to be a bummer, but that kind of time, only the positives come out. You never see anything negative coming out of that kind of period, because on spring practices, I've been covering a lot, you can only see so much. You only can see 15 minutes, then you have to leave the practice, and also you're practicing, you're not actual games. But in any case, it's optimistic to see Nico developing, and I think he will definitely be ready for September. But I do want to point out also today, Joe Milton had his pro day at UT, and he threw a bomb.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we know that he can throw bombs. And, of course, obviously, shout out to Kamal Haddon and Jalen Wright, among other volunteers that went through pro days. I imagine all three of those will get drafted. And I'm very excited to see where they go and see what they can do. I think Jalen Wright, honestly, has the highest ceiling in the NFL. But I think Haddon could play pretty well somewhere down the road. So, in any case, it's always cool to have pro day. But
Joe Milton's big throw on the pro day even make the NFL Brazil, the NFL account for Brazilians. So it was fun to see my Brazilian football fans like Rafael seeing Joe Milton.
As I said, when there's no pressure, the lights are not on, Joe Milton will fire the prettiest deep ball you'll ever see. The problem is he's just not truly, I think, consistent enough to be an NFL quarterback. But here's the thing: I'll be rooting for him because even though, yeah, he wasn't great at Tennessee. He still was pretty good. I mean, he still is leaving Tennessee with an 11-5 record as a starter. And frankly, echelon.
He won the Orange Bowl, which was probably his best game he did at Tennessee.
That, or I'd say the Vandy game from this year.
But I'll put the Orange Bowl higher because that game had more importance than the Vandy game.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. So, I mean, Joe Milton, and then plus, too, the friendship he had with Hendon Hooker, I think, despite maybe some of the disappointments, especially like against the Georgia, or like Florida, because, honestly, I was rereading, I was going for like our chat logs earlier this week, one night, and I was going back and like listening to our voice chats to each other, like around the Florida game. And I was just so brutal on Joe Milton throughout the season. I was very brutal on him. Maybe I was too brutal on him in retrospect. But, he didn't live up to the expectations, I guess, I had for him internally, which it's not fair to him because, whatever I envision is not ever truly going to happen.
Yeah, but good luck. I hope he had a good statement at the pro day, and definitely, I think he'll be picked in the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah, I think he'll be late too. I think all these guys will be later. Although Jalen Wright may skyrocket a little bit, but the problem is running backs, they just don't get valued as highly anymore. And also, shout out to the Baseballs. They won their series over Ole Miss this weekend. So they are now 1-1 in SEC series. Okay, let's get into some NFL. And first, some Brazilian NFL news. We'll save Otani for after the NFL.
Okay.
The Brazilian Eagles game that will be aired in early September will be aired on Peacock in America. So I don't know how that makes you feel. This NFL, escape to Brazil. It's going to be streaming only.
Yeah, it's so funny. So I guess a Brazilian can watch the NFL Brazil game on TV, but Americans will have to at least put on the stream TV, but they can't. So and the rumors are really growing that the Cleveland Browns are going to be the team. I was really hoping for the Falcons, maybe, because of proximity to News 12 and, maybe I can do some partnership, but, whatever team is going to pick is going to be really, really big game. Cannot wait. I told Rafael and my girlfriend that I want to be there, and I imagine Rafael, he's an Eagles fan, and Eagles playing here in Sao Paulo, and I told Rafa, save as much money as you can because that's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. I know as a big Eagles fan, he should definitely go and see that game. But what you're going to see is going to be a little bit different than you're used to because there are some new NFL rules that have come out this week. Maybe the most radical change is the kickoff rule. So the kickoff, basically, they're kind of taken from the XFL, where instead of having a full
the XFL 2021, not the XFL 2001.
Correct. The 2021 XFL, which actually technically the UFL now, but the XFL sequel starts this weekend. Not that I really care, but still, just as a note, that does start this weekend. But basically, and then there's a good graphic that I think, pardon my take, cats, I'm going to pull up their graphic here to better explain this.
But basically, it eliminates touchback.
Correct. And I have it up right here. Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, and you can see my cursor here. So the kicker is going to kick off from the opposing 35. Now, traditionally, these guys, the other 10 who are on the kickoff team, would normally line up behind the kicker, right, and get a full field head start. However, in this new rule, they're going to line up at the opposing 30. Meanwhile, the receiving team have to have 9 players between the 30 and the 35. So basically, when the ball gets kicked off, they're going to sit there. And then when one of the people in the receiving or landing zone get the ball, that's when they can actually go and run at each other. So they're only getting like a 5-yard head start to run into each other versus, the past where they would have the full field. And the thing about this is if the ball doesn't reach the end zone, they have to return it because there's been an increasing trend where a lot of kickoffs have just ended up in fair catches. So you can only fair catch it, or you really can't fair catch it at all. But the ball. So basically, the ball ends up at the 35 if it goes out the back of the end zone. So pretty good field position, the 35. The ball is at the 40 if it doesn't even reach the landing zone.
So I guess so fair catch was the one who was eliminated, not touchback.
Correct. So basically now, the kickers who have specialized in kicking the ball out of the back of the end zone, that's no longer the ideal thing to do. You want to kick it shorter to A, either force a return, or B, let the ball return, hit the landing zone, and then go into the end zone. So that's going to be difficult.
So if the ball goes to the landing zone and then goes to the end zone, what happens?
It goes to the 20.
Oh.
So that's the worst. If you're the receiving team, that's the last thing you want to happen. You do not want the ball to land the landing zone and then go into the end zone.
Oh, I see.
The best possible scenario is for it not to even make it there. So if for some reason they have just an awful kick, you only go into the 40-yard line. And just if it goes out of bounds, it only goes 25 yards from the spot of the kick. So that would be like the 35 or 40. So it's going to be real interesting to see the strategy that comes out of this.
Yeah, definitely. There's going to be some changes, and this offseason is going to be, I guess, teams to adapt. But I feel like it was, and also this rule is to eliminate probably contact with fair catch, which really start to growing.
Yeah, and I think it's going to force more kickoff returns. It should hopefully bring more like kickoff returns for touchdowns. So it'll make things a lot more exciting than they have been on kickoffs because they've been a formality. So I think it's safer and it's more exciting. So I'm okay with the rule change.
My friend Rafael Della Vedova did not like it. I was talking to him today, but for me, I really feel like the best kickoff ever in football was the 2001 XFL. Do you remember how they happened?
No.
So basically, the ball was spot at the 50-yard line, and then one player from each team would go from their side of the field, and whoever catches the ball first will get the kickoff. We'll get the start the game, or choose.
Right.
There was no coin flip. So that was a good way to start the game, but I mean, I get exciting way, but definitely a lot of risk here. That's why I was joking about it. Like that's why I joked. The 2001 XFL or the 2022 XFL, because they were definitely different in terms of starting and kickoff. But I guess the NFL definitely is trying to adapt ways to make it safer, but still keeping the sport exciting.
Yeah, now I'll say this. One thing I don't like is the banning of hip drop tackles. Because my thing is, how are guys going to tackle in this league? Because hip drop tackles to me are basically basic tackles.
And I guess it makes you nervous because, like, why this rule couldn't be invented for the 1999 Super Bowl?
I mean, I was a baby back then, so. But.
No, because if this rule, if this rule, if this rule was, you know, uh, if there was a rule like that in 1999, wouldn't be a penalty for that last play of the game for the Titans and
I
Rams?
guess there would be, wouldn't there? Yeah, and they get one untimed down to win the game, or at least
Yeah.
send it to OT. So, yeah, you're right about that. But we have to, like, at a certain point, like, I don't want this turning into flag football, Like, we got to have tackling. And I understand we're trying to tackle in safe ways, but, I mean, tackling is never not going to be dangerous.
Yeah, you play football, you take your risks.
Yeah. So, in any case, I'm interested to see how those rule changes affect the NFL. Now, the real pot-stirring, kettle-brewing story of the week here, Shohei Ohtani. He came out on Monday with a statement, didn't take any questions, basically saying, yeah, my interpreter stole money from me so he could do gambling on offshore accounts. I had nothing to do with this. This is not my fault. Don't ask any questions. Bye.
First of all,
that?
definitely not a good way to start his tenure as a Dodger because you already have all the spotlight with this contract. And now this, he's definitely going to be a player that everybody is going to have their focus on. And come on, like, there's a lot of protection from him with the LA media, but you have to take it into consideration, like, how can you let your interpreter have that access to your money? And we're not talking about uh, 50 grand, 100 grand, 200,000 grand. That's 4.5 million.
I mean,
That's a
how
lot
much
of
was the
money.
interpreter getting paid, or was he supposed to get paid? I mean, that's a lot of money for an interpreter.
No, but my question is that Shoei did not explain is that how did he had access to that money if this money was coming from Shohei?
Right, and how did Shohei not know where that money was going? I mean, I'm sure he has bank statements. Like, look, like even like I'm just imagining, like if I go to work in like Japan, right? I don't know any Japanese. I would need an interpreter myself. But even if I can't read any Japanese and all my bank statements are like in Japanese, I'm gonna get someone to interpret that for me so I know where my money's going. Right? Like, and the same thing here. Like, yeah, Otani is not in his native language, not dealing with native language, dealing with English bank statements. But, like, at the end of the day, like, you should be able to know where your money's going. And I can't buy that he didn't know that this was happening.
You saw that meme that said, "Oh, Pete Rose was one interpreter away from the Hall of Fame."
Pretty much. Because, like, basically, Shohei Otani can play dumb. Like, oh, I don't know. I'm Japanese. I didn't, I don't know any English, but, like, I'm sorry. I just cannot buy that.
And his interpreter is either gonna come out and say he's gonna be the fall guy, or it's gonna be like, "Hey, I was just the middleman." He's either the fall guy or the middleman.
Yeah, and I just wonder, how culturally this will work, because there's a huge thing about honor in Japanese society. Um, and if he's lying, I mean, think about how popular Shohei Otani is in Japan.
That's
But
why, like, all because of him, the Major League Baseball play regular season games before opening day just to promote their biggest Asian star in Asia.
correct. But you mean something like this could easily taint his image over there. Because honestly, I think they will take it a lot harder than Americans will, because of like how big honor is in not just Japanese society, like in Korean society and Chinese society. Dishonoring is a big no-no in those societies. So,
But interesting that the Major League Baseball starting their own investigation, and and they're in the state of California, where gambling is not illegal. So there is not going to be not only a debate of scamming someone, but also criminal implications.
right, because obviously, as we all know, sports gambling is becoming increasingly legal across the country. So I don't think that's going to be the crime here. The crime here is, if he did take his money, then that's theft of money, right? So I mean, that's the crime, not the gambling part of it. Now, the gambling part of it is illegal in terms of competitive for MLB and other sports. But I think we also have to ask here too: should the leagues continue to get in bed with these gambling companies like DraftKings and FanDuel? They're taking all kinds of advertising dollars from them, but they're still going to be like it's bad for the players themselves to gamble.
But that's something's going to be happening worldwide, in Brazil as well. TV and then teams are all connected to gambling companies. Look at Rio Branco, even my beloved Rio Branco. Look, this is a betting website, literally sponsoring Rio Branco, a team in the fourth division, the state of Sao Paulo. So gambling websites and gambling companies are now in bed with sports leagues, sports teams, and television that broadcast sports. It's inevitable. That is not going away.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see what happens with college. I don't know if you saw this, but the NCAA wants to ban player props. You know what those are, right? So like you bet individual things on players. They're like Nico Iamaleava is going to throw for at least 300 passing yards.
Yeah, it's like here in Brazil that they are also trying to ban two in soccer. Like this player is gonna get a red card, or this player is gonna get a yellow card, or how many yellow cards, because that leads to more better tricking into betting, match fixing, because that's a match fixing for gamblers that not directly affect the game. It's a more indirect way.
Yeah, so I'm just curious to see how that gets affected and how far these individual sporting leagues can take MLB, take these gambling companies into bed with them, especially if the Otani thing blows up in their face. Now, I will say this opening day overall is tomorrow across MLB. The Braves got pushed back to Friday. Are there any opening round matchups or opening weekend matchups that interest you? And now Braves Phillies is interesting, of course.
Yeah, it was going to be a sold out game, but yeah, they already said they anticipated rain. Interesting matchup. Yankees and Astros definitely a one, because those teams don't like each other, especially Yankee fans are always going to be looking at Astros as a little bit of a cheater, especially the whole 2017 scandal. The Dodgers playing their first game in California. They're already 1-1, and
it's going to be an emotional day in Baltimore tomorrow. Obviously, after their bridge collapse earlier this week.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a game, a very interesting game in Baltimore, because definitely there'll be a lot of honors for a lot of remembers because of that episode.
Yeah. Additionally, too, the Cleveland Oakland game. According to my friend Nick, he used to be my roommate in college. Apparently, there's going to be a huge protest outside the stadium over the situation with the Oakland A's, and they're going to just tailgate but not go in the stadium. So I'm curious to see what the opening night crowd looks like for the Guardians and the A's.
Yeah, tickets are going for $12. So, and I pretty much think that's the cheapest.
No,
Uh,
Miami's cheaper. Pirates Marlins is $7.
oh, that's depressing. But did you saw the Marlins are having all you can eat sector for like $40? That's a
Oh
really
my
good
gosh!
deal.
Wow, for a game and a buffet, dude. That
Yeah, I'll
actually
take it.
none of these prices are crazy. I mean, the largest one's probably the Rangers at 128, but like everything else is under $100. I mean, you know, goes to show that baseball just is not in demand like football is at all.
I mean, there's 162 games. Definitely opening day is the one a lot of people like to be part of it. There's even people saying, oh, it should be a holiday. Not that much. I really think opening day should have been on a Friday or a weekend, but nevertheless, I am excited for baseball season. Definitely, the teams to watch is the Yankees. They went for Juan Soto because they knew they cannot rely solely on Aaron Judge to hit. Definitely the Dodgers that we just mentioned, and how can Shohei Ohtani handle this whole off the field pressure and keep being a good player that he's been paid off. Texas Rangers, the current World Series champions. How they're gonna do it? Are they gonna go for a back to back?
Right. Can Arizona repeat their season they had last year, making it into the World Series? Can the Braves figure out the Philadelphia Phillies? That'll be the question throughout this entire season.
Yeah, and they're gonna start that task this weekend on Friday, not on Thursday.
Oh, for sure. Definitely going to be some very interesting baseball throughout the season. Um, so we'll try to keep tabs with it throughout the year. Quick NASCAR, William Byron wins the Circuit of the Americas, a very average race. Just wasn't that exciting at all. They are racing on Sunday night for Easter at Richmond. So I prefer Dirt Bristol for the Easter race, but we'll see what Richmond can deliver. I mean, the last few years at Richmond have been okay. Some good strategy races, but we'll see what they've got. And to transition into Brazil with some soccer news here, the U.S. men's team has won Nations League.
2-0.
Yeah, 2-0. And shout out to El Tree, who could literally never make it through one game without getting reprimanded for being either racist or homophobic or whatever El Tree does. Like, have these people ever been taught how to act in public before?
Nick, I want to say something that I'm not defending what they do. I'm trying to explain or understand why they behave like that. That's something cultural that you don't change in months or with fine. That's something you have to cultural change take years to show that you can root differently. And the more you try to ban it, the more you put a resentment and more glorification of something that should be seen as deplorable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is like I guess there is a rebellious streak to it to an extent.
Yeah, yeah.
What they should be rebelling against is their team time and time and time again coming up short. When was the last time Mexico won a big tournament anyway? I mean, it's been a while.
I would say the Olympics in 2012. I want to say that. I think the Olympics in 2012, they won the soccer gold medal against Brazil. I think that was the last time.
Yeah, of course, they can't get past the round of 16 to save their lives in the World Cup. I mean, they've lost, 8 straight times? I mean, a whole generation has only known a Sweet 16 exit for Mexico. So, I hate to hate. I mean, like, literally, the U.S. doesn't even care about soccer like Mexico does, and we've been to the quarterfinals more recently than Mexico. So,
And when U.S. made it to the quarterfinals, they beat Mexico in the playoffs.
Yeah, the U.S. owns Mexico, and soccer is like our fourth sport. So, You know,
I think it's like Mexico with soccer is like Canada with hockey. Both love their sports, but they get dominated by US because Canada loves hockey. They haven't won the Stanley Cup in 30 years.
well, I'll say this: the Canadian national team though dominates the Olympics. Though they do dominate the U.S. hockey team, so it's a little different because like the franchises in Canada can't control where they're getting their players from. But you are right in that extent that the clubs of Canada can't get it done.
But yeah, I think it's a great win for US. Well, in a sellout crowd in AT&T Stadium. So I guess now the Dallas can say they saw the home team got a championship in Dallas.
Absolutely. And for the U.S. moving forward here, does this give them good momentum for Copa America this summer and inevitably for that World Cup in 2 years?
Oh, I think so. Definitely, they're gonna be more uh, with less pressure, and I think they're getting to like, hey, we are good in North America. We want to compete now with the South American teams.
Absolutely. I certainly hope we can find a way to do so. But, you know, Brazil looks pretty good right now, don't they, Gus?
Oh yeah, they had two really good friendly matches. Good 1-0 win against England at Wembley, and a 3-3 tie with a lot of controversies because, first of all, the Spanish Federation literally at the match day said there were not going to be a VAR, which was a little bit.
Wait, how do they not have a VAR in 2024?
Yeah, they literally just say, "Hey, our friendly match is not going to have VAR because the game was played at Santiago Bernabéu in Madrid." If I was the Brazilian Confederation soccer president, I would have been questioned, like, how in the world you guys don't have a VAR in this multi-billion-dollar stadium for this really big friendly match? But I guess he was okay with that. There was a lot of some controversial calls, but in the end, Brazil came back from a 3-1 deficit to tie the game. But the best player for me in those both matches is Hendrick. He scored the winning goal in Wembley against England, and he was very key player for the 3-3 tie against Spain. So my question is, should we be hyping up Hendrick, or should we be like, okay, those are two friendly matches. He's just a 17-year-old player, but what he's doing at his age, it's remarkable. He's been in the Brazilian national team and really having a lot of personality to get into those games and make a difference.
Yeah, and I can't wait to watch him on the world stage because I've been hearing about this kid for a long time, and he sounds like he's just going to be absolutely special. And to go into Europe, into Wembley, into Madrid, and play well is impressive. Those are intimidating atmospheres. Historically for Brazil, Europe has been an Achilles heel. Like either going to Europe and failing, or playing European teams and failing. For Brazil to get back on top of the World Cup, you have to go through Europe, and this is a good way to get yourself up to speed there. Because you can beat other South American teams, beat North America, but Brazil has to beat Europe.
And it was funny to see the reaction of Spanish sports media. They are hyping up Hendrick even more than Brazilian sports media because Hendrick is going to join Madrid in the summer of 2024. So Carlo Ancelotti is going to have a big task because Hendrick and probably Mbappe are going to be arriving at the club this summer transfer window. So where there's going to be space for Rodrigo, Vinny Jr., Hendrick, and Mbappe.
Right. Well, obviously Mbappe is going to be your starter right now, but Endrick in a year or two down the line, I think, can be your starter. Mbappe is what, like 27 right now?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, when you get Mbappe, you have to start him. But yeah, and
He's
Hendrick,
still in his prime, and like Mbappe could play for another decade.
yeah. So, Madrid is building a team with a lot of young stars, and that's scary because when Madrid had their last team with a lot of stars, there were a lot of aging stars. Beckham, Zidane, Ronaldo. They're all like in their 30s. Now they're getting a lot of superstars that are, Mbappe's the oldest, and he's 27.
Yeah, they're trying to replicate what they were in like 2010
Yeah,
with some of
but with
those. I mean,
younger
some of those
players.
squads were some of the greatest I've ever seen.
Yeah. So those are two good games. Dorival Jr., I think, had a good way to handle. The team was more exciting to watch. You know, the team definitely felt a good vibe. So good 2 games for Brazil, who are focusing on the Copa America in this summer in US. Neymar is not playing, according to a Brazilian journalist, Rica Perrone. He's only coming back in August. So Neymar is out of Copa America. So he's coming back probably for the South American qualifiers, and probably already thinking ahead and preparing for the World Cup.
I mean, for him, I think it's World Cup or bust at this point for him.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Sao Paulo State Championship semifinals. Santos, remember Santos relegated, made it to the finals. Great game tonight at Corinthians Stadium because Santos wanted to play with more crowd because Villa Belmiro Santos Stadium only can have 20,000 fans, and Santos play at Corinthians Stadium with 44,000 fans and beating Red Bull Bragantino 3-1. Before analyzing Santos, this loss for Bragantino, Red Bull Bragantino, is questioning because Bragantino has a big investment from Red Bull. There's a lot of money, millions of dollars been put in, and they're seeing okay-ish results. If this was only Bragantino without Red Bull, it would have been impressive. But with all the branding and all the money Red Bull puts in, is their third straight consecutive semifinal elimination in the state championship. They were out of Libertadores, going to Sul-Americana, no titles. So the fans are wondering, like, uh, you know, with all that investment Red Bull makes, are we going to get any titles? Because it doesn't matter if you sell players or have a good branding if you don't get any titles. And Red Bull Bragantino definitely, I feel like, needs to win titles to show that this investment is worth it. And the São Paulo State Championship is always a good opportunity. But the third straight year they fell in the semifinals. Last year was definitely more humiliating because it was against Agua Santa, and which was a team with the lesser investment compared to like Santos and Palmeiras, which Santos eliminated this year, Palmeiras 2022. But I really feel like Bragantino definitely should rethink some points. But for Santos,
They're basically Kentucky, it sounds like.
What?
They're basically Kentucky. They keep on losing to all these teams they shouldn't.
Not Kentucky per se, because there is not upsets, but Bragantino, I feel like, is a team that the fans expecting to see more because of all the investment and all the branding and the Red Bull created when they got there. Because they're like, when Red Bull bought Bragantino, they were promoted to the first division, won the second division, the Brazilian second division, and then the next year they went to the Sul-Americana final. They were like, okay, we're in a good track. We're going to be champions soon. 3 years after that, 4 years after that, and the titles are not arriving, and fans are like, okay, we see all this investment, but no titles yet. So definitely Bragantino fans are not happy with that loss. But Santos, I mean, after being relegated last season and bouncing back very fast that way, it's for me, the making to the final of the state championship is more important for the morale than to the like getting a title, because after being relegated you need to bounce back soon because of the all the what fans went through.
Oh yeah, I mean this is definitely a bounce back year. I mean I think this is a great momentum for them to get back to be on top of Serie B to get back into the top division.
Yeah, that's true because a lot of those players are going to remain for the Serie B, and and winning a title definitely would bring definitely the morale back. Their opponent's going to be defined tomorrow. Palmeiras playing at home against Novo Horizontino. Definitely Palmeiras the favorite, trying to get their third consecutive state championship. But I wouldn't count Novo Horizontino out. They already eliminated São Paulo and Morumbi. So, but still, Palmeiras, they always find ways to win it, to make it to those kind of games, and I feel like it's going to be a big game. Going to the second division now of São Paulo State Championship, and we had a lot of upsets actually, because the Serie A2, as we call here, for me, one of the toughest soccer tournaments in Brazil and maybe in the world. And we had the all the lower seeds eliminating higher seeds. So we have um, number one seed São Bento being eliminated by 8 seed Noroeste. Number two seed Ferroviária eliminated on penalty kicks by Juventus. Third seed São José eliminated by 6 seed uh, Velo Clube. And fourth seed 15 Piracicaba eliminated by fifth seed Portuguesa Santista. So 5 through 8 seed eliminating 1 through 4 seed. So that was a really shocking night in the second division. And to wrap up the soccer in Brazil, state Sao Paulo State Championship fourth division, where Rio Branco is in it, playing on Saturday against Independente of Limeira. They had a very, very disappointing game on Saturday, tying 1-1 to Joseense. Definitely good first half, terrible second half. Definitely the fans were not happy about it because if they would have won that game, they would have been already in the quarterfinals, playing their last game with no worries. But now they kind of feel like they have to win it to get in without worrying about any other results that are happening in this final week of the regular season. So,
Right, because I think the other teams they would have to concern about if for some reason they lost, and Independente is the second worst team in this.
yeah,
There's no
and
frozen.
no, and they have a 15 player roster currently, and they might
Wow,
have 14 to even 13 player roster.
wow.
So,
I mean,
and
they barely can even put out a team.
yeah, they had problems with with players being out of injuries, diseases. They started the tournament with a company managing their soccer team. The company left, so I went in a Limeira radio station today, and they were like, "Hey, can you ask Rio Branco to tie the game?" I was like, "No, I can't because we need to win." And they were like, "They're happy with tying and miraculously staying," but I don't see that happening. I think Rio Branco will take care of business because if Rio Branco doesn't take care of business, they would have to hope Vossen, Ska Brasil, or Osasco Dax at least tie their games. So
Mm,
get win. Don't worry about other results. That's all I
exactly.
said.
Exactly. Take everything into your own hands if you're Rio Bronco, because otherwise, people are gonna get fired again.
Oh my
Recently,
god!
so
I don't even want to think about it.
yeah, I just hope I don't see the poop emojis come out because, like, in that little the Portuguese group chat I can't read, but I mean I can still keep up with the score update.
Uh huh.
So like I just know things are going well or going bad based off the emoji reactions. So
Oh yeah.
either like if it's good, it's all prayer emojis and hearts. If it's losing, it's either laughing emojis, poop emojis,
Or clown emojis.
yeah, clowns emojis. I'm so sorry, this make me laugh, but I know things are not going well when I see the clown and the
Poop
clown and poop
emojis.
emojis come out.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's true. The Rio Branco news group that we have here, where people get news and updates of Rio Branco with their WhatsApp.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to be a part of it, even though I don't really know what's going on. So,
But at least you can keep up with the score updates, and that's what we try to do. Like a
yeah.
lot of people can't watch, so they are at least informed of
Right.
the
And at
game.
least sometimes, though, I do go through and it'll translate the article for me. So, like,
Oh,
I'm able to keep
oh,
up.
so you go to the Rio Branco website articles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've got it
Oh,
there, and I'll have it, and I'll have it translate so I can read what happened. So,
I appreciate it. I put a lot of thought into those articles. I really try
right.
to
And of
revamp.
course, what sucks is with the translations is it's probably not exactly getting exactly what you were meaning when you were writing in Portuguese, but still, it's
What I appreciate you're taking the time to take a look into that. That makes me
absolutely.
very happy. But
That's
hopefully, Rio Branco take care of business and we get into the quarterfinals.
absolutely, and your job will not be done from there. So for
Yeah.
this season, so
Yes.
absolutely, vamos Tigre
Vamos Tigre.
and go Vols.
Yeah. The duel.
So hopefully our teams are still dancing this time next week, because on episode 124 we'll talk Final Four, opening week of MLB, spring football, all of that, and hopefully we're talking about a historic run for the Tennessee Volunteers and back to the playoffs, hopefully for Rio Branco. But for Gus Tomazeli down in the Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, I'm Nick Hill in Chattanooga, Tennessee of the United States. You've been watching episode 123 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports, the only sports broadcast that talks about both American and Brazilian sports.